Tonight we fire up the flops. Not the classics. Not the legends. No! Tonight we celebrate the consoles that tripped over their own cables on launch day. The ones your cousin swore were way better than PlayStation. Right before they vanished from stores forever. The Phantom, the Pippin, the Gizmondo. If none of those ring a bell, congratulations, your childhood was financially stable. So fluff your pillow, grab your weird third-party controller, and let's drift off together into the soft, tragic hum of gaming's most lovable disasters. This is Sleepy Geek Lore, and tonight we press start on regret. You're lying there in the dark, wrapped in a soft hum of ambient silence, when the memory boots up, a machine you never owned, one that maybe never existed at all. The Phantom console, a promise wrapped in vapor, a shape on the horizon that tech blogs chase for years, like Bigfoot in a plastic shell. The year is 2002. You're sitting at a beige computer desk, speakers buzzing faintly with AOL Instant Messenger pings, reading breathless headlines. The future of gaming is here. Spoiler. You last 3 minutes on 1990s dial-up. And the Phantom? You'll see. Before we boot up, hit like and subscribe, but only if this kind of slow-burn geek nostalgia feels like home. Drop your time zone below so we know who's dreaming with us. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background and let's drift into tonight's tale. You first hear about it in a forum thread buried somewhere between flame wars about ATI versus NVIDIA and a conspiracy theory that the Dreamcast could still be saved. The Phantom console. Not a brand. Not a platform. A vision. Infinium Labs, a name that sounds like a sci-fi villain shell company, claims they're about to release a broadband-based, game-on-demand system that will change everything. You rub your eyes. In 2002, that sounds like witchcraft. The website is full of glowing renders, sleek, silver, impossibly futuristic for its time, and yet not a single journalist has touched one. That doesn't stop tech blogs from melting down in hype. The Netflix of games. One headline screams, before Netflix even had streaming. You click a grainy.wmb file, a sizzle reel of CGI explosions, cutscenes, and 3D menus that aren't running on any known hardware. Your mouse cursor lingers, skeptical, and yet it's mesmerizing. You imagine it on your shelf, nestled between your Xbox and your spaghetti bowl of tangled Ethernet cables. Your mind fills in the blanks. Unlimited games, no discs, all streaming, zero loading. You don't realize it, but you've just stumbled into the realm of Vaporware, a word coined for things that are announced loudly and die quietly. The Phantom becomes a legend before it even exists. Your best friend swears his cousin's roommate saw one at E3. A blog posts a leaked image, blurry like a cryptid, supposedly from a Florida warehouse. Rumors swirl that Microsoft tried to buy the company but backed out. People on message boards debate specs like they've held the motherboard in their hands. But no one has. Ever. Meanwhile, Infinium Labs keeps promising release dates that drift like a mirage. First Q4 2003, then early 2004. You're still waiting in 2005. That year, Popular Science names the Phantom one of the worst 25 tech products of all time. Infinium Labs changes its name to Phantom Entertainment, as if hoping that renaming the ghost will make it corporeal. They even pivot to launching just a keyboard, the Phantom Lapboard. It's wireless. It tilts. It kind of works. Maybe. A lawsuit hits. SEC investigations swirl. Journalists dig up the CO's checkered past. A former exec testifies that the entire venture was a shell game, and yet the legend endures. Even now, forums whisper, what if it had launched? You remember sitting late at night, staring at a loading screen that never moved. That was the Phantom, not a machine, but a moment. A promise of cloud gaming before the cloud had formed. A whisper of what could be. And in some alternate timeline, it booted up just fine. Mainstream historians will say the Phantom was a grift, a joke, a footnote. But fringe tech geeks, they see it differently. They see it as the first dream of Stadia, of GeForce Now, of Xbox Game Pass, of a world untethered from hardware. Even now, collectors scour auction sites for anything labeled Infinium Labs. They find press kits, mugs, unused business cards, a few prototype shells, but never, not once, a working console. You chuckle softly. Somehow, the Phantom still wins. It lives rent-free in your memory, a reminder that belief is the strongest graphics engine of all. You drift deeper into the glow of your CRT monitor. The screen hums with static potential, like it wants to believe the Phantom is real as much as you do. Someone on Slash insists they're under NDA from Infinium Labs and that the tech works flawlessly. Another user counters with screenshots from Florida business records, red flags everywhere. You lean forward, heart weirdly caught in the thrill, not the console but the chase. You're no longer evaluating a product. You're unraveling a mystery. The Phantom stops being a console and becomes a campfire myth in the digital wilderness. Meanwhile, under the hood, the concept isn't half bad. The idea of delivering full games over broadband, that's the world you live in now. But in 2003, most households are still clawing their way out of dial-up. You remember the screech, like a robot screaming underwater, just to check your Hotmail. The Phantom's vision depends on a future that hadn't arrived yet. And let's not forget its specs, or the lack of official specs. Every time Infinium drops a press release, the numbers change. 1 gigahertz processor? No, 2.4 gigahertz. NVIDIA GPU? Actually, it's ATI, or maybe custom. A hard drive? Definitely. Size? Compact. Weight? Comfortable. Operating system? A custom version of Windows XP embedded. No one sees it run, but everyone has an opinion. The closest thing to proof comes when a few journalists are finally invited to test a unit. The event is private, controlled. Most leave unconvinced. The demo console, it turns out, is a PC in a fancy shell running Windows games off a hard drive. Not streaming, not cloud-based, not the future. Just a Windows box dressed up for Comic-Con. And yet, something about the Phantom never fully dies. Maybe it's the logo, sleek and severe like a techwear brand. Maybe it's a haunting idea of what could have been, how it almost touched the cloud gaming future 15 years early. To this day, no one agrees on whether it was Vaporware grift or premature genius. Some tech historians argue it was doomed by poor timing, that had Infinium waited just 5 more years, with fiber internet and cloud infrastructure rising, the Phantom might have worked. Others say the company was never serious, that the endless delays and vague promises were a smokescreen to keep investors spinning. But you remember the feeling. The idea that a whole library of games could live in the air, accessible from anywhere. No cartridges, no discs, just a UI and a dream. You wanted to believe in that world. Maybe you still do. Your eyelids flutter. The fan hums. You imagine powering up a console that never existed, hearing a startup chime that was never programmed. A fake loading screen appears in your mind. A pixelated bar crawling forward endlessly, and in that half-dream state, you swear, just for a moment, you see the Phantom boot up, the logo flashes, a menu scrolls by, games load, all of it perfect, all of it impossible, but you smile anyway, because maybe the Phantom never needed to exist. It only needed to be imagined. The blinking cursor fades, and something older flickers into focus. Plastic the color of harvest gold. Wood paneling, or at least something pretending to be wood, lines the console's front like a kitschy coffee table. You feel a click under your thumb. Not from a touchpad. Not even a button. Really, it's a funky little stick, tall and stiff, like someone shoved a joystick into a bottle of cough syrup. You're holding the Fairchild Channel F, the first home console with interchangeable cartridges. Not Atari, not Nintendo, not even Magnavox. Fairchild. The F stood for fun, by the way. Bold. You're back in 1976. Bell bottoms. Pong. The idea of playing anything on your TV is still wild. You picture families gathering around flickering black and white screens, the faint static of RF interference buzzing under the soundtrack of polyester sitcoms. Game graphics are blocky, crude, not because they want to be, but because the hardware is practically drawn with bricks. But here's the thing. Every other console before the Channel F is basically frozen in time. Built-in games. Hardwired logic. You get what you get. The Channel F, it's modular. A yellow cartridge clicks into place with a satisfying clunk, like a cassette going into a tape deck. There's even a mechanical resistance, as if the machine is taking a breath before coming to life. It doesn't boot instantly. You flip switches, you hear a low hum. The screen flashes, geometry appears, a square bounces, history unfolds. Most people credit Atari for changing gaming, and that's fair. The 2600 was a cultural earthquake, but Channel F came first. It beat Atari to cartridge-based gaming by a full year. It was the first to say, what if the console isn't the game? What if it's the platform? This wasn't just a technical leap. It was a philosophical one. You're no longer buying a palm machine. You're buying a gateway to whatever future games might come, provided, of course, they do come. The man behind the Channel F? Jerry Lawson, a soft-spoken black engineer at Fairchild Semiconductor, who led the team that cracked the code of removable ROM cartridges. In the history books, his name too often gets skipped. But here, in this sleepy lore space, you take a quiet moment to honor him. Without Lawson, there's no NES, no Genesis, no PlayStation. Just a long line of sealed boxes gathering dust. And that controller? Oh, the controller. It looks like a futuristic hypodermic. No, scratch that. It looks like someone tried to reinvent the joystick using only a glue stick and vibes. Tall, cylindrical, ridiculously clicky. You can twist it, push it, pull it, rock it side to side. A multi-tool for the gamer's hand. Assuming that hand isn't already cramped. Still, it works. And in a strange way, it feels fun. Like a toy designed by aliens who saw an arcade machine once in a dream. You load up video cartridge number 1. The games don't have names so much as functions. Tennis, hockey, shooting gallery. They play in silence. No music. Just you, the screen, and a pixel that doesn't know it's supposed to be fun. But you keep playing. And for a moment, it's 1976, and this is the future. Fairchild priced a console at $169.95, which sounds cute now, but adjusted for inflation, that's north of $850. Still, it sells. Kind of. Over 250,000 units move in its first few years. Not bad for a pioneer, but not enough to win the war. Atari arrives in 1977 like a fireball. The 2600 is sleeker. More games, cooler branding, third-party support, and, crucially, better marketing. Atari had swagger. Fairchild had engineers. Within 2 years, the Channel F is barely a whisper. The final Saba version limps into Germany under a different name and design. Try to squeeze out a few last units before the lights go off. Fairchild exits the market. Atari surges. And Jerry Lawson's work fades into background like silent code. Historians still debate why the Channel F didn't thrive. Some say the games were just too basic. Others argue Fairchild didn't understand consumer markets. They built chips, not brands. There's even speculation that Fairchild didn't want to be in the console business long term, that it was a side project, a fluke, maybe even an accident. But here's the thing no one debates. The Channel F changed everything. Every console that came after borrowed its bones. The removable cartridge, the modular format, the idea that software should evolve even if the hardware doesn't. And yet, the Channel F isn't remembered in the mainstream. You won't find it in retro game cafes or modern mini-console reboots. Its controllers are too weird. Its games are too quiet. Its logo, a blocky red F like it's grading itself, doesn't scream nostalgia. It whispers it. You think of that click when you push in the cartridge. That satisfying thunk of possibility. Not the game itself. The potential. The promise that next week, a new cartridge might arrive and change everything. You didn't have to wait for a new console, just a new idea. And maybe that's what we've lost. You shift under your blanket. Somewhere in the fuzz of your dreaming mind, the Channel F lives on, not as a console, but as a feeling. A reminder that the future of gaming started quiet, underfunded, in weird shapes and wood panels. A plastic tower the color of autumn mustard. A square bouncing across a screen in total silence. A joystick that tried too hard, and yet worked. You imagine Jerry Lawson watching you play from the doorway of time, smiling faintly as you twist that controller one more time. Not because it was perfect, but because it was first. But first doesn't always win. You've seen this pattern before. The innovator stumbles so the imitator can sprint. Fairchild made the road. Atari painted the lines. Nintendo would someday pave it in gold. But the Channel F remains this peculiar ghost on the tech timeline, a prototype of a dream still half-formed. You picture it sitting on a shag carpet next to a hulking tube TV. There's a glass ashtray nearby, a coffee mug with brown rings dried in the bottom, and the console itself humming faintly, waiting to be noticed, not loved, maybe, but understood. And here's the strangest part. It still kind of works. There's a small but fiercely loyal community online that collects and preserves Channel F cartridges. A few even program homebrew games for it. As in, today. They've written guides on the weird controller logic. They've archived every manual, every RF shielding schematic, every cartridge pinout. To them, the Channel F isn't a footnote. It's a cornerstone. They meet in forums, obscure corners of Discord, and sometimes, almost ritualistically, they boot up Desert Fox or Space War and listen to the silence as the screen flickers on. Not ironically, not nostalgically, but reverently, like they're honoring a sacred code base. It makes you wonder, how many tech relics are out there like this? Machines that changed everything but were never thanked for it? You think of your modern console, whisper quiet, sleek, touch sensitive, storing 1,000 games in a menu so fluid it feels like thought. But it owes its existence to that yellow box from 1976 with its square buttons and stubborn controller. You remember that stiff plastic stick. How it didn't just move up and down, but twisted like a volume knob that also happened to steer. Strange, overdesigned, but maybe brilliant in its weird way. Historians still argue about whether that controller was ahead of its time or just plain bad. Was it a bold experiment in interface design or a committee-built Frankenstein? Some say it influenced the Atari 5200's analog stick. Others say it went nowhere for good reason. But as your fingers float across a dream version of that controller now, you don't care. What matters is that it tried. It broke the mold when the mold barely existed. You remember the cartridges, boxy, colored like retro toasters, labeled with plain sans serif numbers and titles. No cover art, no mascots, just cartridge number 9, math quiz. You think, no way this would sell today. But back then, it was space age, and it wasn't all Pong clones. Some of the Channel F games were legitimately weird. One let you drop bombs on stick figure paratroopers. Another was a kind of two-player chase game that somehow predicted the tab mechanic of later party games. The console even had a pause function, years before Atari figured that out. Yes, the Channel F had pause, before anyone thought that would be important. It also had chess, a cartridge called Video Kart 17, let you play a crude version of chess against the CPU. It was slow, the AI was barely there, but it was chess on a TV in the 1970s. You picture some lonely kid in 1978 spending an entire Saturday afternoon losing to a machine that couldn't even say check. It makes you smile. And the sound, or rather the lack of it, the Channel F's beeps were so faint they barely registered. And there was no music, Just visual feedback, blinking shapes and color flashes. It's like the console was whispering everything. Minimalist before minimalism was cool. In that silence, your mind filled the gap. You imagined the whoosh of your pixel missile, the bloop of bouncing blocks. The Channel F wasn't just a console. It was a canvas for imagination, a dry riverbed waiting for your brain to pour water through it. You wonder what would have happened if Fairchild had held out a little longer, if they'd rebranded, if they'd licensed their tech to someone flashier. If Jerry Lawson had stayed in the public eye, would Fairchild be a household name today? Would kids wear Channel F hoodies in Twitch streams? Probably not. But maybe that's the mystery that hangs over Channel F. The open debate that won't go away. Did Fairchild fail because the world wasn't ready? Or because they stopped trying? No one can say for sure. But you know this. Every time you press a cartridge into a slot, real or metaphorical, you're echoing that first motion, that Fairchild clunk, that click of potential. You settle deeper into the mattress. Outside your window, a breeze stirs the leaves. It sounds like static from a long-dead RF cable. In your mind, the Channel F boots again. Green lines, orange squares, a controller in your hand, weirdly tall. You're not winning. There are no achievements, no online play, just a flickering screen and the sense that you're part of something forgotten but foundational. You smile in the dark. The Channel F never needed to win. It just needed to exist. You're outside of Toys R Us. It's after dark. The parking lot hums under buzzing sodium lights. Your sneakers tap lightly on the concrete as you pace, hand stuffed in the kangaroo pocket of a hoodie that smells faintly like popcorn and plastic wrap. It's May 11th, 1995, a date no one expected, not even the store manager. You glance at the flyers in your hand. They're for the Sega Saturn. You blink. Wasn't this supposed to release in September? It was, until Sega panicked. Until they made the boldest or strangest marketing pivot in console history. You remember how it unfolded. That moment at E3 when Sega's US exec took the stage and uttered those infamous 3 words. It's available now. Gasps, whispers, chaos. Retailers scrambled. Developers blinked. Publishers panicked. You, though, you were just excited. Another console, another promise. And yet, something felt off. You hold the box now. It's awkward, heavier than you thought. You smell the fresh cardboard, the factory dust, the strange chemical note of new plastic, like an ozone tingle before a thunderstorm. You set it on your floor beside the TV. Its curved edges and smoke-black CD tray give it the look of a spaceship's coffee table. You press the power button. It lights up with a blink, green LED, faint hum. The Saturn awakens. But something's missing. Games. Only 6 titles shipped with the launch, and half of them feel rushed. Panzer Dragoon is the standout, a soaring rail shooter with dreamlike skies and a dragon that feels like a pet you don't deserve. But the others, they stumble. No Sonic, no killer app, no plan, and that's when the cracks begin to show. You find out later, retailers were furious. Only a handful got launch units. Others, like KB Toys, were left out completely. In protest, they boycotted the Saturn, didn't stock it at all. Worse still, third-party developers hadn't even finished their games. The Saturn surprise launch wasn't a power move. It was a Hail Mary. And the reason? Sony. Sega had heard whispers that Sony's new console, the PlayStation, would launch at $299. So Sega tried to strike first. Steal momentum, be the first next-gen box on the shelf. But it backfired. You imagine a Sega executive pacing a fluorescent boardroom, looking at sales charts through tired eyes. They'd rushed to launch, alienated partners, and confused their fans. The Saturn, once their great hope, was now a riddle no one wanted to solve. And it was a riddle. Under the hood, the Saturn had twin CPUs, 2 32-bit processors running in parallel. It sounded powerful. It was powerful. But developers found it maddening. Optimizing games for dual-core architecture in 1995 was like writing poetry while juggling chainsaws. Beautiful in theory, Messy in practice. Some devs pulled out, others shipped broken games. A few brave souls, like the team behind Nights into Dreams, managed to wrangle the system into brilliance. But the effort was Herculean. You pop open the tray again, slide in a disc, Clockwork Night. It whirs, loads. You watch the intro, stiff 3D models, pre-rendered cutscenes, MIDI music. It's charming, but compared to Sony's sleek new machine, the Saturn feels like a brilliant antique. And the controller? It's wide, round, with 6 face buttons and a D-pad that feels like a boiled marshmallow. You remember playing Virtua Fighter with it, pulling off combos that felt more like typing than punching. You pause, look at the console. It's working, technically, but it feels lonely. You start to sense the Saturn's fate was sealed not just by bad luck, but by bad blood. Sega Japan and Sega of America were constantly clashing, one team designing hardware, the other trying to market it. They disagreed on pricing, on games, on everything. Some say Sega Japan sabotaged the American branch, refusing to support its marketing strategy. Others say the Americans panicked, launching too soon, shouting too loud, hoping to drown out Sony with timing instead of tech. Historians still debate it. Was the Saturn undone by internal politics? Or was it always destined to fail in a market shifting towards cinematic gaming and easy development pipelines? You run your fingers along the plastic grooves on the Saturn's surface. It feels like fossilized ambition. Because here's the truth. The Saturn wasn't a bad console. In Japan, it actually did well. RPGs, dating sims, arcade-perfect ports. It thrived. But in the West, it stumbled out of the gate and never recovered. You think back to that Midnight Toys, our US launch, the confusion, the emptiness, a console you weren't even supposed to own yet. You imagine some Sega engineer, exhausted, unshaven, probably living on vending machine coffee, watching a demo crash for the 3rd time that week, wondering if it's too late to change everything. You hear the Saturn's disc spin down, the LED dims. There's a kind of sadness in the air, not failure, but missed opportunity. The Saturn could have been great. It was great, in parts, but it never got the chance to breathe. Still, you keep it. You stack its games neatly. You admire its stubborn shape, the way it tried to be two things at once. Bold and familiar, fast and stable. Like that blinking cursor from Section 1. The Saturn feels like something left half-loaded. A promise mid-boot. You exhale. Let your fingers rest. Sega had reached for the stars and dropped the controller, but the echo still lingers. A startup chime. A disc spinning. The dream of dragons in low-res skies. And for one strange summer, it was yours. You walk into the dim arcade of your memory. Everything smells like sugar-dusted soda, scorched circuitry, and adolescent victory. The carpet beneath your feet is patterned in neon shapes. Triangles, zigzags, lightning bolts. The official seal of 1990s chaos. You hear the familiar click-click chunk of joysticks, the digital slap of 6-button combos, and a high-pitched cry of pixelated fighters caught mid-uppercut. And then you see it, the Neo Geo AS, sitting behind the counter like royalty, encased in glass. Not playable, not touchable, just visible like a holy relic. Your breath catches, because this isn't just another console. This is the arcade, in box form. It launched in 1990. And while everyone else was fighting for the home market, Neo Geo raised an eyebrow and said, "We are the arcade market." Literally. Its hardware was identical to SNK's MVS cabinets, the same guts, the same chips, the same spirit. That meant perfect 1:1 ports of Samurai Showdown, Metal Slug, King of Fighters, Fatal Fury, and more. No downgrades, no compromises. But there was a price. The AES cost $649 at launch. In 1990 money. You pause. That's more than the Phantom. More than the 3Do. More than most people's first cars. And the games? $200 each. Cartridges the size of VHS tapes. Boxed in thick black clamshells that made Sega Genesis cases look like matchbooks. Each one heavy enough to knock someone out. They weren't just games. They were artifacts. You picture some rich kid, the kind who owned a Laserdisc player and called Soda Cola, unwrapping one on Christmas morning, plugging it into a gigantic rear projection TV, while the rest of us squinted at CRT fuzz and rental tapes. The AES wasn't for everyone. It didn't try to be. It was a statement, a flex, and yet it wasn't empty bravado, because Neo Geo's games were incredible, fast, brutal, gorgeously animated. They weren't just ahead of their time, they defined their time. The sprites were huge, the controls tight, the soundtracks punchy and unforgettable. Metal Slug's explosions, Samurai Showdown slashes, the unmistakable voice. Winner is Terry Bogard. You grin in the dark. Yeah, that voice lives rent-free in your brain. The AES controller wasn't a gamepad. It was a joystick, a full arcade stick, with 4 satisfying candy-colored buttons that begged to be mashed. You didn't hold it, you wrestled with it, played hunched forward, like you were still feeding tokens into a machine that didn't exist in your house. You remember hearing rumors that SNK never really intended to sell many ES units, that it was more about prestige, a kind of tech demo for the brand, a way of saying, hey, we're not Sega, we're not Nintendo, we're arcade first, last, and always. Some say it was just a way to recoup development costs. The same carts that went into cabinets could be repurposed for rich collectors, minimal overhead, maximum markup, but others, especially fans, believe SNK genuinely wanted to bring the arcade home. They just refused to compromise. If that meant charging $200 for a cartridge the size of a microwave dinner, so be it. You slide a game in. It thunks. King of Fighters 98 boots with a flash of crimson and chrome. The announcer's voice cracks through your old speakers like divine thunder. Ready? Go! And you're off. Chaining combos. Perfectly animated kicks. Bright trails of pixel fire. The game runs like it's hardwired into your bloodstream. It's beautiful, but the dream didn't last. By the late 90s, the AES was a ghost. Most gamers never saw one in the wild. It was expensive, unmarketed. SNK shifted focus to arcades and eventually handhelds, the Neo Geo Pocket, the NGPC. Tiny miracles in their own right, but not the same. And then bankruptcy. In 2001, SNK folded, briefly, but the fans never let it die. Even now, AES collectors trade cartridges like treasure hunters. Complete sets go for thousands. Some carts, like Kizuna Encounter Euro Edition, are so rare they're treated like holy grails. There are forums dedicated to just identifying label variants. People mod their AES consoles with RGB outputs, stereo jacks, capacitor upgrades. And SNK? They came back. Quietly, steadily. New hardware. Re-releases. A resurrection of Samurai Showdown in full HD. A world where Terry Bogard shows up in Smash Brothers, tipping his cap like the king he always was. Historians still argue whether the Neo Geo AES was a console or a collector's artifact. Was it ever meant for normal households? Or was it a flex, a love letter to arcade culture that just happened to be playable at home? You lean back. The AES powers down. But in your mind, the fight continues. You remember that blinking cursor from the Phantom? The clunky cartridge from the Channel F? The LED glow of the Saturn? Each of them chasing the future in their own way. But the ES? It didn't chase anything. It was a future, just priced like a luxury sports car. You smile, eyes half closed, as imaginary coins clatter into a bottomless arcade cabinet. Continue, it asks. You always do. The box is huge. You don't mean console box, huge. You mean VHS collection huge. Microwave huge. Statement piece huge. It sits in the corner of your mental attic, tucked behind a stack of demo discs and faded game magazines. The logo is strange, geometric, corporate, almost like a tech startup that accidentally made a game system. And the name? 3Do. Not Sony. Not Sega. Not Nintendo. Just 3Do. You run your fingers along the embossed ridges of the case. There's a subtle curve, almost elegant, Like someone tried to sculpt it into a minimalist art piece, then panicked halfway through and stuck a disc tray in the middle. The year is 1993. Doom is taking over PCs. Mortal Kombat is igniting parent groups. Consoles are about to hit the CD era. And in walks the 3Do interactive multiplayer, promising everything and charging for it. At launch, the 3Do cost $699. You cough gently into your blanket. Yeah, that's not a typo. $699 in 1993 money. Adjusted for inflation, try over $1,400. Even the Neo Geo raised an eyebrow at that. But the 3Do was never meant to compete in the regular console war. It wasn't a console at all in the traditional sense. It was a platform, a standard, like DVD or Blu-ray. Anyone could license the tech and make their own version. And some did. Panasonic, Gold Star, Sanyo. You remember seeing a Gold Star 3D unit once, squat, dark gray, and suspiciously like a VCR. The kind of machine your uncle might keep in his den, claiming it did everything. Except this time, it kind of did. The 3Do was capable. Seriously capable. 32-bit processing, CD-based storage, full motion video playback. It could render 3D, play audio CDs, display photography quality images, a sleek graphical interface, even mouse support. This was a multimedia machine, baby, the future. But it launched without a single killer app. No Sonic, no Mario, no must-have. Its pack-in title? Crash and Burn. A middling sci-fi racing shooter that felt more like a demo disc than a system seller. Other games trickled out. Gex was fun. Return Fire was strange and memorable. Road Rash had charm. But they weren't $700 experiences. And then there was the controller. You remember picking it up, light soft plastic, with a long, thin cord that daisy-chained to the next controller. That's right. The 3Do only had one controller port. Want 2 players? Plug the second controller into the first. Genius or weird oversight. Historians still argue. There was no reset button. Just power. As if the console didn't believe in second chances. And still, you wanted to like it. You remember the box art. Big, bold letters. Interactive. Real. Next generation. You squint at a screenshot of a grainy FMV actor and think, whoa, it's like watching a movie. You didn't know yet that FMV meant full motion video, or that it would become gaming's most awkward adolescence. You pop in Night Trap. Yes, that Night Trap, the controversial one. Except here, it looks even more awkward, fuzzy jittery, like you're watching a soap opera on a bad hotel TV. And yet it is charm, because the 3Do, in all its misplaced ambition, meant well. It wanted to be everything. Console, computer, media hub. It wanted to redefine what games could look like. And in many ways, it did. The problem wasn't the tech. It was the business model. Trip Hawkins, yes, that Trip Hawkins, founder of Electronic Arts, was the mind behind the 3Do. He left EA to start a company that would license a gaming standard to hardware manufacturers. That way, 3Do wouldn't lose money on hardware like Sega and Nintendo did. Instead, they'd sit back and collect licensing fees. It made sense on paper, but in practice, without unified branding, no one knew what the 3Do was. Was it console? A DVD player? A business tool? Why did it cost more than a PC? Why were the games delayed? Retailers were confused. Developers were wary. And gamers bought PlayStations. By 1995, Sony had launched its $299 machine with sharper marketing, faster games, better support. Sega Saturn, for all its struggles, had arcade credibility. Nintendo 64 was on the horizon. The 3Do never had a chance. You exhale. The room is quiet. The fan hums softly. The same sound you remember from the console's disc spinning, struggling to load grainy FMV on a summer night long ago. But here's the thing. For a brief moment, the 3Do felt limitless. It dared to dream in full motion. It told developers, we're not just a console, we're a revolution. It said, "You don't have to be Sony or Nintendo to make a game box." And that idea, it echoes forward. You see it in the Ouya, in Stadia, in cloud gaming, in indie consoles. The dream of making gaming open, of removing the gatekeepers, didn't die with 3Do. It just rebooted, again and again. And if you look closely, you'll still find people who swear by it. Collectors, modders, archivists. They'll show you upgraded units, custom BIOS chips, rare import discs. They'll argue Star Control 2 was best on 3Do. They'll remind you, Alone in the Dark ran better here than anywhere else. The 3Do didn't lose because it was bad. It lost because it was first and expensive and confusing. But for the people who remember it, it wasn't a mistake. It was a dream you could plug into your TV and hold in your hands. Heavy, complicated, beautiful. You let that thought flicker like a boot screen in your mind, and then fade to black. Your eyes adjust slowly to red. No other color, just red. Crimson lines, crimson shapes, crimson text. It's like stepping into a monochrome fever dream, one drawn entirely in laser pointer ink. You blink once, twice, but the world doesn't change. That's because you've strapped a Virtual Boy to your face. And the headache hasn't even started yet. It's 1995. Nintendo, still coasting on the glory of the Super Nintendo, wants to show the world that it can innovate beyond sprites and Mode 7. The result? A strange two-legged tabletop console that looks like it belongs in a dentist's office or a failed NASA prototype. You remember the ads, aggressive, edgy, black and red branding with slogans like, "A 3D game for a 3D world." Commercials that screamed, quite literally, as if shouting the word virtual loud enough would make it true. The truth? It wasn't virtual. And it definitely wasn't fun. You shift in bed, imagining the feel of that plastic eyepiece pressing into your nose. The console didn't strap to your head. It balanced on a metal stand. You had to crouch over it like a sniper in a red-lit war zone, squinting into the darkness of your own patience. And the controller? It looked like it wanted to be a spaceship. 2 directional pads, one on each side, as if your thumbs needed to do synchronized swimming just to move forward. It had grips, though curvy, molded, like a promise that one day ergonomics would be invented. You boot it up. Mario's Tennis. That's the packing game. Mario's in there, bouncing around, hitting low poly serves in silence. You can barely tell what's happening. There's depth, sure, parallax movement that gives the illusion of space. But mostly your eyes just ache. Still, you want to like it, because this is Nintendo, because the idea is cool, because 3D gaming sounds like the future. But as the minutes pass, a new feeling creeps in, pressure behind your eyes, and then nausea, and then a soft voice in your brain that whispers, "This is a bad idea. You're not alone." Across the world, the Virtual Boy is confusing kids, frustrating parents, and baffling developers. It launches in Japan in July and the US in August, and by December, Nintendo is already pulling the plug. Less than a year on the market. Only 22 officially released games. You try another title, Wario Land. Actually good, great, even. Side-scrolling platforming with clever use of layers, timing, enemy depth. It plays like a Game Boy game that wandered into a haunted theater. But it's not enough. You feel the ache again, and you power off. The thing is, the Virtual Boy wasn't trying to fail. It had a 32-bit processor. It used LED displays and mirrors to create stereoscopic depth without glasses. It had ambitious software, some of it unfinished. A Metroid prototype. A Mario Kart demo. Whole worlds that never got past early builds. You wonder what might have happened if the tech were just a few years better. If LCDs had been cheaper, lighter, less migraine-inducing. You remember, the Virtual Boy was the last project helmed by Gunpei Yokoi, the man who created the Game Boy. A genius, a visionary, a legend, but also a believer in lateral thinking with withered technology. He didn't chase raw power. He looked for clever, accessible solutions using cheap parts. The Game Boy succeeded because of that. The Virtual Boy didn't. Some say Yokoi was pressured to ship it too early. Others say the idea was doomed from the start. He would leave Nintendo not long after, with many believing the failure of the Virtual Boy contributed to his resignation. Historians still debate. Was a Virtual Boy a noble experiment that needed more time, or an avoidable misfire that Nintendo should have scrapped? You take off the imaginary headset. Rub your eyes. Even now, all these years later, you can still feel the eye strain. And yet, something about it sticks with you. The bravery, the weirdness, the audacity of building something no one asked for and almost no one wanted, but doing it anyway. You remember those toy aisles in 1995. Bright, loud, packed with Super Nintendo games and Genesis cartridges. But in the corner, at the end of the row, the Virtual Boy sat like an alien monolith. Not plugged in, not demoed. Just there, silent, glossy, red. A warning? A promise? You're not sure. Some collectors swear by it now. They hunt for box copies of Jack Brothers, Tellero Boxer, Red Alarm. They mod their units with modern lenses. They write emulator software. They believe, not in the success of the Virtual Boy, but in the beauty of its failure. Because sometimes, what makes a console matter isn't whether it succeeded. It's whether it tried something no one else dared to. And in that regard, the Virtual Boy stands tall. Well, squats awkwardly on two plastic legs. But still, you drift further into sleep, the red lines behind your eyelids fading into nothing. One last voice echoes softly. Nintendo presents something weird. And you smile, because weird is how progress begins. It arrives in a black box. Not quite slick, not quite elegant, but confident. TurboGrafx 16. You sit cross-legged on the shag carpet, the glow from the CRT flickering against your face. It's 1989. The world hasn't decided what a console should look like yet. But the TurboGrafx has already made up its mind. Sleek lines, cartridge slot up front, a bold red logo that practically shouts, I'm not Nintendo. I'm not Sega. I'm something else. You pick up the controller. It feels good. Familiar. 1 D-pad. 2 buttons. A turbo switch. Your first taste of artificial speed. You press it. You feel the difference. There's something strange, though. This console claims to be 16-bit, but the graphics, the sound, the feel, it's halfway between the NES and the Genesis. That's because the TurboGrafx 16, or PC Engine, as it was called in Japan, is running on an 8-bit CPU with a 16-bit graphics chip. It's not lying, but it's bending the truth. A marketing flex more than a hardware leap. Still, when it works, it works. You slide in a Who card, those tiny credit card size cartridges that feel like they belong in a spy movie, and the game loads instantly. No boot screen, no BIOS, just straight to action. You're playing Bonk's Adventure, the console's unofficial mascot, a bald caveman with a giant head who headbutts his way through prehistoric jungles. It's quirky, it's colorful, it's not Mario, and that's the point. NEC, the electronics giant behind the TurboGrafx, wanted to break into gaming, and in Japan they did. The PC Engine launched in 1987 and became a sensation. It outsold the Famicom in some years. The games were bold, the library massive. The first CD-ROM add-on, TurboGrafx. The first console with anime cutscenes, TurboGrafx. But in America, it stumbled. You remember the ads. Loud, in your face, trying way too hard. They called the Genesis and NES wimpy. They bragged about power. They used words like turbo and blast and raw. But they didn't have Sonic. They didn't have Mario. And they didn't have clarity. Even the name was confusing. TurboGrafx 16. Was that a brand? A spec sheet? A modem? Kids didn't know what it was. And their parents definitely didn't. Still, you wanted it. You remember the plastic of the controller warming in your hands during long sessions of Keith Courage in Alpha Zones. The pack-in title that started in a peaceful village and suddenly turned into a mech suit fever dream. You didn't understand it, but it felt important. Like a dream someone else had and handed to you. And then there was blazing lasers. Fast, tight, a vertical shooter that made your palms sweat. The soundtrack still echoes in your head. 8-bit synths pretending to be a full orchestra. It was smooth, responsive, beautiful. The console had quirks. Only one controller port by default, unless you bought the multi-tap. Region lock cartridges. That strange giant plastic shell that was actually just holding a wafer-thin chip inside. But it worked. And yet, most of your friends didn't even know what it was. They had NES. Some had Genesis. A few would later have SNES. But turbografx? You were the only one. You start to see the cracks. Third-party support is thin. The library in the US stays small, missing many of the Japanese gems. Retailers stopped stocking it. Magazines skipped reviewing its best titles. And slowly, the system that felt like a secret weapon starts to feel like a forgotten spell. You wonder, why didn't it catch on? Historians debate this. Some say it was branding. TurboGrafx 16 just wasn't sexy. Others blame NEC's marketing, which was scattershot at best. Some point to the early Genesis momentum. Others say it lacked a hook, a Sonic, a Final Fantasy, a killer app. But there's another theory. It was too Japanese. The console thrived in Japan with games like Rondo of Blood, YS Book 1 and 2, Spriggon, and dating sims that never crossed the Pacific. The American release felt clipped, sterilized, like an import that didn't quite survive the journey. Still, the TurboGrafx had heart, and later, long after the mainstream forgot, it became a haven for collectors, for weirdos, for people who loved pixel art and chip music and things that almost made it. You see them now. Fans monitor consoles for RGB output, burning CDRS of unreleased prototypes, translating Japanese RPGs, building shelves for jewel case games that never got a proper box in the West. You think about that red logo again. Not angry, just bold. You close your eyes. You see Who cards clicking into place. You hear Bonk's goofy little grunt. You feel the turbo switch under your thumb. The TurboGrafx 16 didn't lose because it was bad. It lost because no one told its story clearly. But you remember, and sometimes that's enough. You tap the screen, and nothing happens. You tap again, this time with a little more force. A delay, a flicker, and then, finally, the screen responds, sluggishly like it just woke up from a nap it didn't consent to. You squint at the grayish display. Faint pixels. Ghosting. Letters that smear slightly when they move. But it's there. You're holding a game.com, pronounced Gamecom, like .com, but cooler. Or so they hoped. It's 1997. Tiger Electronics has somehow taken a break from making those little one-game LCD toys you bought at gas stations and decided, with inexplicable confidence, that they're ready to play in the big leagues. Their pitch? A handheld console with touchscreen input, internet connectivity, multiple game slots, PDA functionality, a stylus. Yes, in 1997, you stare at the clunky rectangle in your hands. It feels more like a digital dictionary than a gaming device. The plastic is a sort of post-apocalyptic charcoal gray. The buttons are spongy. The screen, monochrome, unlit, slow to update. Looks like someone forgot to invent contrast. But it works. Kind of. You boot up the built-in solitaire game. Tap the cards with the stylus. You're already waiting. The lag is surreal. The animations are almost conceptual, more hinted at than drawn. But for a moment, you marvel at it. A touchscreen. Before the Nintendo DS. Before the iPhone. Before styluses were standard. This thing had potential. Game.com could connect to the internet. With a modem cartridge and a whole separate cable, of course. You had to connect it to a phone line and use a DOS-based Windows 95 program to set it up. And when you did, it let you check email. Slowly. Painfully. One message at a time. Still, 1997. A touchscreen handheld with email? That was bold. You look at the game library. It's eclectic. Somehow, Tiger licensed huge IPs. Resident Evil 2, Sonic Jam, Batman and Robin, Mortal Kombat Trilogy. You blink in disbelief. How did a company known for $20 LCD games manage to bag this lineup? And then you play one. Resident Evil 2 loads. Barely. You guide a tiny Leon Kennedy, or maybe a gray smudge wearing a trench coat, across a pixelated wasteland. The zombies flicker in and out of existence like ghosts with bad Wi-Fi. There's no music, only a faint click when you press a button. The tension is gone. The horror is gone. The game is gone. You sigh. The Game.com's fatal flaw wasn't ambition. It was execution. The screen couldn't handle motion. The touch screen couldn't handle precision. The processor couldn't handle anything. But the ambition? It was huge. 2 cartridge slots, a calendar, a phone book, a stylus, internet support, a console that tried to be a PDA, a console that wanted to grow up while others were still playing games about mushrooms and hedgehogs. Historians debate this all the time. Was the Game.com visionary or just delusional? Some say it paved the way for the DS, that its touchscreen, dual slots, and hybrid interface were years ahead of their time. Others say it's a cautionary tale, proof that ambition means nothing without polish. Tiger tried to fix things. In 1999, they released a second model, the Game.com Pocket Pro. Smaller, sleeker, still grayscale, still no backlight, still slow, still Game.com. It faded from shelves within a year, and yet somehow it lingered. You remember seeing one in a drawer at a cousin's house, or in a discount bin at a KB Toys, or on the last page of a gaming magazine, advertised next to Game Sharks and infrared Game Boy lights. It became background noise in gaming history, a thing everyone kind of remembered but no one could describe. And then, slowly, the legend grew. You hear people talk about it now like it was mythic. The first touchscreen handheld, the console with email, the one where Sonic runs at 2 frames per second. There's a strange affection for it, the kind reserved for misfits that tried, that reached too far. Collectors now hunt for box units. They share photos of complete game sets. They find joy in the jank, like archaeologists uncovering a fossil of failed innovation. There's even a small group trying to emulate it, not because the games were good, but because someone should remember what almost happened. You tap the screen one more time. The lag is still there, but so is the dream. In another timeline, the Game.com gets better. It gets a backlight, a color screen, a faster chip. It becomes the next big thing. Maybe Nintendo partners with Tiger instead of releasing the DS. Maybe you grow up in a world where the Game.com is remembered alongside the Game Boy and the PSP. But that's not this world. In this world, it was a whisper, a flicker, a soft gray flash in the handheld wars. You close your eyes, let the image fade, and in the silence you smile. Because even when it failed, the Game.com dared to be first. You turn the box over in your hands. It's lighter than expected, almost hollow. But when you open it, there's a whisper of old ambition inside. Glossy black plastic, a curved lid. The disc tray stares back like a single mechanical eye, waiting. And there it is, stenciled in small, proud letters near the corner. Amiga CD32. Not Sega. Not Sony. Not Nintendo. Just Amiga, a name once whispered in reverence, now fading into dust. The year is 1993, and this is Europe's secret console. You press the power button. It chimes softly. You blink, and for a moment, you're back in the 80s. The Amiga brand was once a titan in personal computing. Vibrant sprites, incredible sound, demo scene wizardry. A computer that could dance circles around IBM clones. A system with style. But now it's a console, or trying to be. Commodore, the parent company, is desperate. They've been bleeding cash. Their golden child, the Amiga 500, is ancient history. PC gaming is on the rise. And so they make a final move. A gamble. They strip down the Amiga 1200 computer, bolt on a CD-ROM drive, and build what becomes the first 32-bit CD console released in Europe. Before the PlayStation. Before the Saturn, before the Jaguar, depending who you ask. It launches on September 17th, 1993. And then, silence. You never saw one in stores, because you live in the U.S. And the Amiga CD32 never launched there. Not really. At the 11th hour, Customs agents blocked the shipment. Something to do with unpaid patent royalties, legal trouble, logistics. Commodore's lawyers can't fix it. The American launch dies on the runway. The units sit in crates, unopened, unsold. You sigh, because you know how this ends. But you boot it up anyway. You slide in Microcosm, a surreal sci-fi shooter with pre-rendered video and cutting-edge visuals. It loads. It chugs. The FMV stutters. The controls lag. And you remember, this console was racing to be first, but forgot to be good. The controller feels like a bootleg Genesis pad, stiff, off balance, with squishy buttons and a D-pad that squeaks if you press too hard. It's usable. Barely. You play on. Then there's the Chaos Engine. Top-down, cyberpunkish, gritty. It's better. You see the real Amiga DNA showing through. The art, the audio, the atmosphere. You begin to understand what the CD32 wanted to be. Because under all the rush and compromise, there was power here. The CD32 was built around the AGA chipset, Advanced Graphics Architecture. For 1993, it could do a lot. Smooth scrolling, big palettes, clean color gradients. And sound? It had Paula, the Amiga's famous audio chip, capable of 4-channel stereo sound. In the hands of a good dev team, it sang. But most games didn't sing. They coughed, because porting floppy disk games to CD without improving them, that was the CD32 strategy. No real enhancements. No extra music. Just the same old games with longer load times. A few titles tried. Gloom, Simon the Sorcerer, Alien Breed. But for every gem, there were 10 lazy conversions. You remember reading that only 175,000 units were sold, mostly in the UK and parts of Scandinavia. Some say it was 100,000. Some say 300,000. No one agrees. Because by 1994, Commodore was gone, bankrupt, auctioned off. Their headquarters in Westchester, Pennsylvania, silent. Their tech support line, disconnected. Historians still argue about the CD32. Some call it a prototype for the modern multimedia console, a CD-based system with full motion video and stereo sound, years before Sony would make that formula mainstream. Others call it the final gasp of a great brand drowning in its own mismanagement. There's a particular sadness in it, because the Amiga was cool, like capital C cool. It was a computer of musicians, hackers, animators, game developers with ponytails and leather jackets. It had a soul. The CD32 feels like someone took that soul, printed it on disc, and sold it at a discount. But not all is lost. You feel the weight of the controller again, plastic and awkward. But it reminds you of a time when even dying companies tried to innovate, when anyone could jump into the console wars and stake a claim. You picture the warehouse in Pennsylvania where thousands of CD32 units sat untouched. You imagine a kid in 1994 finally saving up enough to buy one, only to find out the store stopped carrying them. You remember hearing about the CD32 after it had already vanished, learning about it from a magazine sidebar, a half-page obituary. And yet, here it is, booting, running, trying. Even now, modders and retro collectors dig into its architecture. They build FPGA clones, add HDMI output, tinker with shells, translate European exclusives. They don't do it because the CD32 was great. They do it because it meant something. A flicker of brilliance. A last spark from a fallen star. You let the disc spin one last time. The startup logo flashes, pixelated rainbow arcs over a low-res globe. And you smile, because even in failure, the CD32 dared to dream in stereo. It fits in the palm of your hand, but just barely. It's taller than a Game Boy, sleeker than a Game Gear. The buttons are laid out in a strange formation, 4 on the left, 2 on the right. You tilt your head, then you realize it rotates. You can flip it sideways and play vertically. Portrait mode. In 1999, this is Wonderswan, and it's a final gift from a man who invented portable gaming, Gunpei Yokoi. You breathe in slowly. The name alone feels sacred. Creator of the game and watch. The original Game Boy, the cross-shaped D-pad, the guiding spirit behind lateral thinking with withered technology. And after the Virtual Boy, after the failure, after the resignation, he walked quietly out of Nintendo, head held high. And just before fate caught up with him, he left one last spark behind. You hold that spark now. The Wonderswan is light, featherweight, powered by a single AA battery that runs for up to 30 hours. Monochrome screen. No backlight. No color. But it's sharp. Clear. The pixels are dense. Letters are legible. Lines are crisp. You load Gunpei. Yes, named after him. A puzzle game about completing connections, bridging gaps. It feels like a metaphor, like a thank you card from the console to its creator. The game boots instantly. No flash, no startup jingle. Just black and white grids, clean, functional, and satisfying. Pure gameplay. No fat. And that's what the Wonderswan was. Minimal, efficient, purposeful. Bandai released it in 1999, at a time when the Game Boy Color was dominating. Sega had already failed at portables. Atari was long gone. But Wonderswan didn't aim for flash. It aimed for practicality. Affordable, long battery life, rugged, and smart. You remember seeing it only in import catalogs, tiny pixelated screenshots next to price tags in yen. The game list was full of unfamiliar names, but also Final Fantasy, Gundam, One Piece, Rockman EXE, all in Japanese, all exclusive. And yes, there were RPGs, whole story-driven worlds that lived inside this tiny vertical rectangle. You remember screenshots of Romancing Saga, Dicing Knight, and Tactics Ogre. Beautiful tile art, Japanese text. Impossible to play unless you could read kanji, which you couldn't, but still, it called to you, because this wasn't a toy. It was a pocket computer from an alternate dimension. You rotate the console, boot up a vertical shooter. The screen orientation changes. Controls shift. It feels like magic, like you're inside the system's thinking, not the other way around. Then came the Wonderswan Color, launched in 2000, just a year after the original. Same shape, new screen, now in full color. More power, more memory, still only 1 AA battery. Still cheaper than the Game Boy Color. It launches with Final Fantasy, Digimon Mr. Driller. For a moment, just a moment, it looks like Bandai might make a dent in Nintendo's armor. But you already know how the story ends. Nintendo releases a Game Boy Advance. Widescreen, 32-bit, full support from every publisher on Earth. And Wonderswan, noble, brilliant, practical, quietly fades away. In 2003, it's discontinued. No announcement, no funeral, just silence. You exhale through your nose, because this one hurts. Wonderswan was good, maybe not revolutionary, but good. It didn't waste your time. It respected your battery. It delivered gorgeous sprite-based games at a fraction of the price, and it dared to be smart in a way most portables weren't. Some historians say it was the last true Japanese handheld, deeply rooted in local culture. Most of its best games never left Japan. Most of its advertising was tied to anime. And Bandai? They were a toy company, not a console giant. This wasn't global domination. It was expression. And maybe that's why it stayed special. Even now, people mod their Wonderswans with backlights, translate the games, rip the ROMs. They talk about Judgment Silver Sword like it's a sacred text, a homebrew shooter that pushed the hardware to its limit, and was so good, Bandai gave a physical release. In 2004, a year after the console was dead. Think about that. The Wonderswan died, and still, it gave us one last miracle. You close your eyes. You see the gray shell of the original unit, the odd, wonderful button layout, the soft click of the D-pad, and that strange sense of elegance that only comes from a machine that knows exactly what it is. Not a toy, not a gadget, just a swan, flying once, then gone. You stare at the logo, confused. An apple, but not that apple. Not the sleek, silver, brushed metal fruit of your modern MacBook. This is the rainbow-striped Apple of the 90s. Cheerful, chunky, and just a little weird. Beneath it in friendly sans serif, Pippin, you blink. Yes, Apple made a console. Sort of. You reach down and power it on. A faint click. A whir. The screen lights up, not with a startup chime, but a beige and pixelated silence. The kind you associate with educational CDRMS and mid-90s school computer labs. Welcome to the Apple Pippin. It's 1996. Windows 95 has taken over the world. CDRMS are everywhere. Multimedia is the buzzword of the decade. And Apple, still pre-Jobs revival, still teetering financially, has partnered with Bandai to create a multimedia player that just so happens to play games. The plan? Build a home computer. Console hybrid using stripped-down Macintosh internals. Call it Pippin, named after a kind of apple, naturally. And then see what happens. What happens is confusion. You look at the thing. It doesn't look like a console. It looks like a toaster made by an architect. Matte plastic. A front-loading CD tray. One big round controller port. The controller itself? Oval. Lozenge-shaped. 2 grips. A trackball in the middle. Like someone fused a mouse and a gamepad in a lab accident. It's strange. It's kind of elegant. It's also not good. You load up Power Rangers Zeo versus the Machine Empire. It's a CD-ROM game. Technically, the graphics stutter. The frame rate limps. The animations look like they were drawn in MS Paint during a power outage. You try Gundam Tactics. Marathon. Chessmaster 3D. It's all the same. Educational CDRMS repackaged as games. Slow. Boring. Clunky. This isn't a console. This is a presentation machine. A glorified kiosk. And it costs $599 in 1996. Let that sink in. The PlayStation was already out. The Saturn. The N64 was weeks away. And Apple, somehow, launched a device with no GPU, no real storage, no native controller support beyond a single port. It ran on System 7, an early version of Mac OS, with a 66 MHz PowerPC CPU and 6 MB of RAM. You sigh. Even the Virtual Boy had ambition. The Pippin feels like a committee decision. Something built not by game designers or hackers or visionaries, but by executives. Bandai tried to market it in Japan. Apple tried to market it in the US. Neither succeeded. The commercials barely explained what it did. It wasn't just a console, they said. It was a multimedia internet appliance. A phrase so vague it could mean anything, and therefore meant nothing. You try to picture the target audience. Kids? Too expensive. Gamers? No support. Teachers? Maybe, but there were already Macs in classrooms. Families? Not when the PlayStation existed. Not when the Saturn was bundling arcade ports. Not when Nintendo was preparing to drop Super Mario 64. The Pippin was obsolete the moment it arrived. Apple sold fewer than 42,000 units worldwide. That's not a typo. Fewer than most Kickstarter handhelds. Fewer than some YouTubers' merch drops. And still somehow it exists. Collectors hunt for them. There are Pippin fans, modders, archivists, a tiny handful of CDRMS floating through eBay like ghosts. Some are sealed, some still boot, some never did. You run your hand along the plastic casing. It's cool, understated, even kind of beautiful, in a soft-edged early iMac kind of way. But inside, there's nothing resembling joy. No world to explore. No secrets to unlock. Just a PowerPC chip struggling to pretend it's a console. Historians still debate it. Was the Pippin a desperate cash grab? A misunderstood experiment? A case of Apple trying to be something it wasn't? 5 years too early? Some say if Jobs had been in charge, it never would have happened. Others say he would have doubled down. But here's the weirdest part. Pippin's bones did survive. That PowerPC chip, Apple kept refining it. That weird hybrid idea, media box plus computing interface, shows up years later in Apple TV, in the iMac, in everything. The Pippin failed. But its ghost haunts Apple's entire design philosophy. Simplicity, closed systems, One port, one button, a smile you can't quite explain. You eject the CD-ROM. The tray slides out with a sigh. You set it aside. The Pippin is gone, but its lesson remains. Never mistake a name, even Apple, for a guarantee of greatness, but always admire the ones who try. You hold it carefully like it might explode, not because it's dangerous, although that's debatable, but because it feels like something that shouldn't exist. It's glossy, rounded, heavy for its size. The buttons are laid out like a Game Boy Advance that got lost in an Italian fashion boutique. The screen is bright, genuinely bright. There's a camera on the back, an SD card slot, a SIM card tray. Wait, a SIM card? You're holding a Gizmondo, and you have questions. It launched in 2005, will whisper confidence in a hurricane of chaos. Made by a company called Tiger Telematics, no relation to the tiger that made Game.com. The Gizmondo promised to be more than just a gaming handheld. It was a lifestyle device, a personal assistant, a GPS navigator, a camera, a music player, a messaging system, and, yes, a full-fledged gaming console. And somehow it was all those things. On paper. In practice, it was something stranger. You power it on. The boot logo is smooth. The UI is surprisingly clean. Early 2000s minimalism, with large icons and no nonsense. You scroll through options, messaging, music, games, GPS. You tap games. There are only a handful of titles. Sticky Balls, Trailblazer, FIFA Soccer 2005. Yes, FIFA. EA somehow licensed a game for this thing. It runs. It's choppy, but it runs. The sound is decent. The screen's resolution is higher than you expect. The build quality? Surprisingly solid. This feels like a device that might have worked. Then you remember everything else. The scandals, the crimes, the unraveling. You take a breath because this story doesn't go where you think. Gizmondo launched in the UK first in early 2005. The US release followed that October. The price? $400. Or $229 if you agreed to see ads on your home screen. Yes, ad-subsidized hardware, before it was normal, before streaming, before Amazon Kindles with special offers. Gizmondo did it first, and poorly. The games never came. Only 14 titles were released in the US. The SDK was a mess. Developers didn't know what to make of the hardware. The camera was a novelty. The messaging system barely worked. And the GPS? It existed in theory, but the software was perpetually coming soon. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Tiger Telematics was falling apart, or more accurately, collapsing in flames. Turns out, several executives were connected to the Swedish mafia. One, Stefan Eriksson, had a criminal history involving fraud, weapons, and racketeering. Money vanished. Salaries went unpaid. Lawsuits appeared. Shareholders panicked. And then the Ferrari crash. You remember the photo. Everyone remembers the photo. A $1 million Ferrari Enzo, snapped in half on a California road in 2006. Stefan Eriksson was in the passenger seat. He claimed someone else was driving. The police didn't buy it. The story unraveled. Investigations launched. Gizmondo was already dead. It had only been on shelves for a few months. By February 2006, Tiger Telematics filed for bankruptcy. Their assets were seized. Their UK store, the only official Gizmondo retail location in the world, closed after just 2 hours of operation. Historians still ask, how did this happen? How did a console launch with so many features and so much ambition, only to dissolve like vapor? Was it hubris? Fraud? Mismanagement? Bad luck? Probably all of them. You scroll through the Gizmondo's menu one last time. It wants to be useful. It tries. The GPS app opens blank. The music player loads. Empty. The camera works. Barely. The buttons click softly like they know it's too late. And yet, there's something magnetic about it. The Gizmondo wasn't just a failure. It was a messianic failure. It dreamed of doing everything. It shipped with technology a decade ahead of its time. Real-time messaging, photo sharing, ad-supported tiers, location-aware games. It had a 400 MHz ARM processor, Bluetooth, 64 MB of RAM, and ran a custom Windows CE-based OS. It wasn't underpowered. It was overpromised. You hear retro fans talk about it now with strange reverence. It had potential, they say. If only the games had come. If only someone else had made it. If only it hadn't been a front for embezzlement. There's even a homebrew scene. Tiny but persistent. People writing their own games. Porting old emulators. Cracking open the firmware. Not because the Gizmondo deserves it, but because it almost did. You power it down. The screen fades. The plastic cools. And in the silence you reflect. Some consoles fail because they weren't ready. Some fail because no one noticed. The Gizmondo, it failed loud. In Ferraris, in lawsuits, in shredded reputations and broken screens. But it tried to be everything. And in that, it remains unforgettable. A handheld console from a crime thriller. A footnote made of diamonds, glass, and very poor decisions. You smile, because sometimes even disasters deserve their moment in the spotlight. It arrives in a cube, a small brushed metal cube that fits in your hand. No disk drive, no cartridges, just one glowing circle on top, soft white, like the kind of light you'd expect from a smart thermostat. It looks elegant, almost too elegant. You flip it over. There's a rubber grip on the bottom, printed with a message. Thank you for believing. You smile, because before it was real, it was a dream, a Kickstarter dream. This is Ouya. It's 2013. The console war is in full swing. The PlayStation 4 and Xbox One are looming. Nintendo has already launched the Wii U. But then, this shows up, a sleek little Android-based console crowdfunded to life with an explosive $8.6 million raised from over 60,000 backers. It was supposed to change everything. You were supposed to plug it in, boot it up, and have instant access to a library of indie games. Emulators, retro ports, all open, all cheap, all developer-friendly. No discs, no walled gardens, no licensing drama. Just play. That was a promise. You power it on. The interface is minimal. 4 tabs. Play, discover, make, manage. It boots fast. Quiet. There's no fan. No spinning disc. It hums with stillness, like a device that doesn't want to disturb your thoughts. The controller? It looks good. Chrome faceplates. Xbox-like layout. But in your hands, it creaks. The triggers are mushy. The D-pad floats like it's been half glued in. The touchpad in the center, designed for swiping through menus, is unresponsive. You tap. You swipe. You sigh. Still you try. You browse the store. Towerfall. A fistful of gun. Super Crate Box. A handful of promising titles. Indie through and through. Many are free to try. Some sparkle with creativity. Towerfall, in particular, is electric. Fast-paced, arrow-dodging chaos built for living room battles. You realize quickly, this isn't a console for everyone. It's a dev kit, an experiment, a sandbox. Ouya ran on Android. Developers could upload games with minimal friction. No dev fees, no certification hurdles. Just make, test, ship. That freedom attracted hundreds of developers in the early days. But then the cracks formed. Performance was inconsistent. Many games were janky ports of mobile titles. The Tegra 3 chip inside, once touted as powerful, couldn't keep up. Load times dragged. Frame rates dropped. And the open philosophy? It let in shovelware. Fast. The store filled with low-effort clones. Tutorials. Half-finished projects. There was no curation. No discovery. And no money. Even the good games weren't selling. Developers began to abandon the platform. And then, silence. You remember it like a fade-out. One week you're hearing about Ouya in every tech blog. The next, it's gone. The company was sold to Razer in 2015. The servers were shut down in 2019. The storefront disappeared. But the cube remains, sitting on a shelf, waiting. You still see it pop up in retro forums. People jailbreaking them. Running emulators. installing Kodi, turning the Ouya into a low-power media box, a retro arcade, a Minecraft server. Others repurpose a controller, hack it into Raspberry Pi projects, use it ironically or unironically. Historians still debate. Was Ouya a scam? A flop? A revolution that fizzled? You lean back. You remember the slogan. The revolution will be televised. They printed it on t-shirts, posters. The startup believed it. And for a moment, so did you. Because Ouya wasn't just about playing games. It was about making them. It empowered people. It removed the gatekeepers. For a moment, it felt like anyone with an idea and a weekend could publish a game on a real console. But the infrastructure wasn't there. The games didn't come fast enough. The quality didn't hold. And slowly, quietly, the dream unraveled. Still, you're glad it happened. Because sometimes, failure is what progress looks like up close. You remember that controller in your hands. Cheap, imperfect, designed by people who cared. You remember watching the Kickstarter video, the promise, the passion. You remember the way they said, we just want to make it easier to create. And they did, just not for long. You reach down, press the power button. The cube glows again, faint, warm. The revolution didn't last. But maybe that wasn't the point. The room is quiet. No startup chime. No fan whir. No glow from plastic power LEDs. Because these consoles, they never existed. Not officially. Not publicly. Not the way we're used to. But their shadows are everywhere. You're staring at a grainy photo. A console you've never held, never played. Half of it looks like a Sega Genesis. The other half, a mysterious attachment that never launched. It's the Sega Neptune. Or at least what could have been. The Neptune was Sega's plan to combine the Genesis and the 32X, a single unit that wouldn't need the clunky mushroom stack of add-ons. No spaghetti of power bricks. No Franken-console tower. Just one sleek system. But the 32X was already failing. And the Saturn was already coming. So Sega pulled the plug. You blink again. Another photo loads in your memory. A console with a Super Nintendo controller. A CD drive. And a familiar logo stamped onto the case. Nintendo PlayStation. Yes, that Nintendo. And that PlayStation. For a moment in history, a real documented, almost happened moment. Sony and Nintendo were building a console together. The early 90s. The Super Nintendo is thriving. CDs are emerging. Sony, already a giant in audio, wants in. They partner with Nintendo to build an add-on, a CD-ROM drive for the SNES. The project morphs. Sony engineers propose a hybrid, a Super Nintendo with CD and cartridge support, a unified machine, the Nintendo PlayStation. But the deal falls apart. Nintendo, behind Sony's back, signs a competing deal with Philips, the one that eventually leads to the cursed Zelda CDI games. Sony, humiliated, walks away, but not quietly. They take their prototype. They build something new. And in 1994, Sony releases a PlayStation, a console born not out of ambition but betrayal, and the rest is legend. You sit with that thought, because the canceled consoles aren't just trivia. They're forks in time. If the Neptune had launched, maybe Sega wouldn't have split their user base. Maybe the 32X wouldn't have flopped so hard. Maybe the Saturn wouldn't have needed to rush. Maybe the Dreamcast would have been something else entirely. And if the Nintendo PlayStation had launched, maybe Sony and Nintendo stay partners. Maybe Mario is on a disc. Maybe Crash Bandicoot never exists. Maybe the N64 never happens. Maybe the GameCube never needs to. One prototype of the Nintendo PlayStation still exists. You've seen it. Auctioned in 2020 for over $300,000. It works. Kind of. Plays SNES carts. The CD drive kind of spins. A pale ghost of a universe that never quite loaded. You think of other canceled consoles. The Atari Panther. The Infinium Labs Phantom. The Nokia Engage 2 that never materialized. The Dreamcast successor that Sega once considered, codenamed Katana 2. Rumors. Leaks. hardware that died before a single commercial aired. Each one carries a question. What if? What if that internal memo had been greenlit? What if that investor hadn't pulled out? What if that partnership had held? Historians love these questions. So do gamers. Because consoles, unlike games, exist in the real world. They leave behind shells. Dev kits, engineering notes, FCC filings, patents, hints, glimpses. You imagine opening a closet in an old developer's home and finding one, still sealed, still running. And then the debates. Would the Neptune have saved Sega? Would the Nintendo PlayStation have made Sony irrelevant? Would the gaming world have become boring? You're not sure. You just know this. These machines haunt the ones that came after, like echoes in the boot sequence, like ghosts in the BIOS, like dreams half-written into code. You close your eyes. You picture a living room from a parallel universe, where some kid is blowing dust off a Sony Nintendo disc and booting up Final Fantasy VII with Mario on the cover. You imagine a late-stage Neptune ad campaign, all brush metal and 90s attitude. You picture a Sega that never left a hardware race. You feel it all, the curiosity, the heartbreak, the unrealized futures. And in the darkness, the loading bar never reaches 100%. It just flickers and fades. There's no cartridge this time, no CD, no menu, just a dim hum, and the faint glow of a standby light in the corner of the room, the kind that blinks once every few seconds like a sleeping eye. You're not sure which console it belongs to, because this isn't one system. It's all of them, all the forgotten machines, the half-born dreams, the flops, the legends, the almosts. You're standing in a mental archive now. Rows of silent consoles line the shelves, each one dusty, each one powered down. But if you press your ear close, you can almost hear them breathe. A whir of a Virtual Boy's fan, a boot-up ping from the Neo Geo, the clunk of a Channel F cartridge locking into place, a whisper of Sega Saturn static, just before the disc spins. They're still alive, sort of, not in sales, not in market share, but in memory, in collectors' closets, in dev kits found at garage sales, in dusty corners of YouTube channels with 37 subscribers who still upload footage of sticky balls running on a cracked Gizmondo. You walk between the shelves. A fandom console, never released, sits on a pedestal of irony. A CD32 hums gently, loading Alien Breed for no one. A Pippin displays a black screen, cursor blinking, waiting for an input that never comes. And in the back, propped up like a crown jewel, the Nintendo PlayStation. Bootable, tangible, haunting. None of these machines won, but none of them truly lost, either. Because here's the secret. Every console leaves a digital fingerprint, a file format, a chipset, a controller layout, a gameplay mechanic, a developer who got their start writing code for something no one ever played. You remember, the 3Do taught developers how to compress video for CDs. The Ouya introduced revenue splits that reshaped indie economies. The Wonderswan brought portrait mode gaming to portables. The Game.com had a stylus before the DS. The Neo Geo proved people would pay for quality. A lot. The Saturn gave us analog control. The Gizmondo introduced location-aware gaming before smartphones did. Failures? Maybe, but also foundations. You reach out and pick up an AES cartridge. It's huge. Feels like a book. You blow into it anyway. A ritual of the past. You smile. These machines, in their silence, still matter because they represent something you can't quantify in sales charts or Metacritic averages. Risk. Each of them, in their own way, risked something. They didn't play it safe. They didn't copy what worked. They didn't aim for the middle. They swung wide, and sometimes they missed, but in the process, they moved the industry forward. You run your hand along the edge of the shelf. There are consoles here you did own, and others you only read about. A few you barely believed were real. Some that were only rumors, whispers in IRC channels and GeoCities pages long since dead. But someone made them. Someone believed in them. And someone, maybe you, still remembers them. The fan kicks on in your memory. A soft purr. Dust shifts. The CD tray opens. Not to load a disc. Just to say, I was here. You sit down in the middle of the archive. Legs crossed. Lights dimmed. And for a moment, all these machines, the Channel F, the CD32, the Wonderswan, the Gizmondo, the Ouya, the Neptune, the Pippin, they don't feel like failures. They feel like chapters. And you? You're the one still reading. Because some consoles aren't built to last. But they're built to be remembered. The lights in the archive dim one by one. Not a shutdown, just a slow fade. The consoles return to stillness, a kind of quiet dignity. No more blinking LEDs. No more boot screens. Only memory now. You lie back, cushioned by the weight of all that history, all that plastic and silicon and promise. Your breathing slows. The whirring in your head of fans, discs, loading bars settles into a kind of lullaby. Do you remember the Channel F's clunky controller? The red void of the Virtual Boy? The cube-shaped whisper of the Ouya? They weren't perfect. But perfection was never the point. Each system tried something. And maybe that's what made them beautiful. They didn't all win. Some barely stood a chance. Some launched early. Some never launched at all. Some lit up your living room for one summer and then disappeared forever. But each one brought a new idea into the world, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes boldly. A new way to hold a controller, a new way to think about sound, a new kind of game, a new kind of risk, and in some strange, sacred corner of the gaming multiverse. Maybe they're still running. Maybe there's a timeline where the fandom was real, where the Pippin found its audience, where the Gizmondo delivered on its absurd promises, where the Saturn soared. You shift under the blankets, warm now, surrounded by that digital hum, soft and low, like a fan cooling a CPU after a long play session. You smile, because consoles may die, but their ideas reboot, and their dreams, they install quietly, deep in memory. May your dreams be 8-bit, and your saves never corrupt.